So once again, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Very nice to see you again. So the last time I was here on May 28th, our topic was the love that liberates. Well, that was part one, so now we're going to do part two, that same topic. And maybe you got the email. I think it was suggested to you that if you weren't here last time, if you could have listened to the talk on the YouTube channel, that would have been great. And if you haven't, that's fine too. I'm going to do a really quick review, but you still have a chance to do that even after this talk. So they'll both be posted there if you need to refer to them. So let me just do a quick review of some of the major points regarding metta that we mentioned from last time. Then I'll offer a couple of new things, and then mostly we want to take a look at the other three Brahma Viharas, or divine abodes, to see how they're all really intertwined and how they support one another. Because I think we mentioned last time, right, that these are simply just four different manifestations or four different faces of loving kindness, of love, of warmth, of friendliness, of goodwill, that manifest in different ways in different situations. So let me see if I can do a screen share quickly. Let's see. Can everyone see that? I can't see faces, so I don't know if, let's see.
I can see.
Okay, great. Okay, so great. If one person can see, then probably everyone can see. Okay, so just quickly, again, this is just a review. So with regard to the divine abodes, or the Brahma Viharas, we can say about them that they're openness of heart with special characteristics, which of course we've talked about and we'll continue to talk about. These are not reactive emotions. These are rather emotions that respond inwardly and outwardly. And these are not qualities or states that arise from habitual patterns or our habitual or hidden agendas, anything like that. And so some of the things that we said about metta last time is that it is vast, unlimited, and impartial. It shines like the sun equally on everyone and everything. It does not create barriers between its object, oneself and its object. It does not need reciprocity or anything in return. So you can see how in some of these ways this kind of loving kindness, this kind of warmth, this kind of love has some very different characteristics than the ones that we're normally accustomed to with respect to what we call love. That is unconditional, without expectation, that it is independent of external circumstances. It will manifest independently, that it arises from a place of abundance and not deficit. That is a way of being. It's not so much a thing as a way of being, or a capacity, or a posture in the world. That it is not self-focused. That it transcends the limits of our capacity to love. We tend to, I think, shrink our capacity to love, but metta takes us beyond that to this immeasurable place. In fact, these four divine abodes are often also called the immeasurables, the four immeasurables. Loving kindness basically is an element of right intention. Right intention says not ill will, which then basically would be goodwill, which is what metta is. So it's very important as a basis for what we want, everything that we want to cultivate, all of our intentions, and how we move through the world. It is the principle that guides ethical action. Ethical action is one of the pillars of liberative practice. And this ethical action, right action, if you will, does support the unification of our mental energy. If we are not acting ethically and kindly and doing all sorts of terrible things in the world, it will not be easy to unify our mental energy, to gather our mental energy when it's time to do that, to sit down and to look at things more deeply. It is a training of the mind and heart, and it undermines self-absorption. Obviously, it's focused on wishing, although we do metta for ourselves, of course, we are focused on wishing goodwill, well, befriending others, no? It is a purification practice. When we say these phrases, especially in the more formal way of practice, it really can show us where we're blocked in our ability to open. It's a practice that brings happiness. Maybe not in every single moment, but as it brings up our wounding and the places where we're blocked, but ultimately it is a practice that brings happiness. And happiness is another support for unifying the mental energy. And metta is a protection for ourselves, and it protects others from our unskillful tendencies. And we talked, I think, last time about the fact that the Buddha, when he taught metta, it was, for the first time, it was to the monks in the forest when they were afraid, right? The tree spirits and the ghosts and so forth and so on. And so just a little summary down here. With metta, we are less reactive, less trapped by our habitual patterns, and that releases us from self-absorption, and that gives us more internal space for discernment. And when we see more clearly and with more discernment and clarity, we can make wiser choices. Wiser choices lead to more happiness. That's more metta, and the cycle sort of can just begin again. So that is just some brief reminders of what we've already said about it. And so we'll continue on. Do you remember that last time we did talk about the fact that we have our experience, and mindfulness and right attention allows us to recognize our experience, to identify that experience, to be present with it in that way. But recognizing it or just noticing what it is really not the full picture. The complete picture would be, let's say this is our experience, and the complete thing is we have to make full contact with our experience. We make full contact with what's occurring. And the way that we do that is with kindness, with friendliness, with an open heart, particularly if what we have to confront is something challenging, right? The metta, the kindness, the friendliness, the warm receptivity is what makes us feel safe. We know that when things are difficult, when we have to face something difficult, it's really important, whether we acknowledge that consciously or not, to feel safe. We want to feel safe to meet something that's hard. And love, kindness, goodwill, whatever you wish to call it at any given moment, does make us feel safe. So we have mindfulness, right attention, insight, and we have love, compassion. The two wings of the bird, we may have mentioned this last time, right? We have insight and love, or wisdom and compassion. The bird can't fly with only one wing. So with insight, right? With insight practices, we can realize non-separation and the fact that suffering is not personal, right? And then compassion can be born from that. And then in a mind that is permeated with love, loving kindness, and compassion, free from attachment and aversion, those are the conditions also then for more insight to occur. So these two are just kind of walking hand in hand, and ultimately they merge, right? Ultimately, we might say that they're not really that different. So, okay. So whether we are using the Brahma-Vihara practice as a heart-opening tool or something else, there are many ways to do this, and depending upon the tradition or whatever, this is not the only way to train the heart. But we do have to train the heart one way or another. It has to open. So because we need to make full contact with our experience, which I just said and I repeat. Make contact with our experience with kindness as opposed to with aversion or resistance, right? Resistance will make the suffering worse. And again, it's the safety of the loving kindness that we can draw close to our experience. We cannot, we can't really understand something that we can't get up close to, right? We have to get up close to see deeply. So it's this that will allow us, will help us to draw close and then to reveal the true nature of our experience, insights, the insight into that. So we said last week that we could speak of the four faces of love. We called it love. We could call it something else, and that just to repeat that and to lead into the other three. That metta is the goodwill, the love, loving kindness that extends itself in the world. Compassion, or karuna, is the love or the goodwill, that the loving kindness that responds to suffering when it encounters that in the world. Appreciative joy is the loving kindness that rejoices in the happiness of others when it encounters happiness in the world. And equanimity is this warm receptivity, the loving kindness, as the warm receptivity of the loving kindness that allows us to hold everything, all the things that we encounter, the joy and the sorrow, together with balance, without collapsing into fear or collapsing into powerlessness. So here are some metaphors which I think are very lovely for the Brahma Viharas. Metta, as we may have said last week or last time, is like the sun at midday in a clear sky that shines equally on everything. The sun does not just shine on the people who want to be in it, and then not the people who look for the shade, right? It shines equally and it shines everywhere. Compassion, or karuna, is compared to the moment before sunset, when the darkness is near, but the sun not only still shines, but it can light up the sky with very beautiful colors. So just as the sun is not intimidated by the darkness, compassion face to face with suffering is also not intimidated or detained. Appreciative joy is like the sun coming up at dawn. The birds sing, the air is fresh, it's the light of a new day, there's renewal, a sense of possibility. The ray of sunshine can fall onto a dewdrop, right? And we could see a whole rainbow of colors. And that image alone perhaps can make you smile. So the happiness of others can inspire us that way, or similarly. And equanimity is like the full moon on a clear night. The moon reflects the light of the sun, as equanimity reflects in itself the other divine abodes, the other three. Some analogies, again, just trying to make this clear in different ways. Some analogies that the Brahma Viharas can be compared to raising a child. Metta would be the equivalent of procuring the child's well-being and welfare. Compassion, or karuna, protecting them from suffering or harm, or alleviating it if it happens, if you can. Appreciative joy, or mudita, is celebrating their success, the success of the child. And equanimity, or upekkha, we leave them alone so that they can do at a certain point, so that they can do what they need to do when it's time to lead their own lives, because we cannot walk their path for them. So we may have to watch them make some mistakes, as well as appreciate their successes and joy. In either case, this balance, this equanimity, is what allows us to do that. So let's have some more specific observations about the other three Brahma Viharas for compassion. So if metta is the wish that beings be happy, compassion or karuna is the wish that they be free from suffering. Simple. So compassion can heal the heart even when the suffering really can't be alleviated. Maybe there's nothing we can do about it. And compassion is also an understanding. Often our habitual tendency may be to react to pain with aversion or denial or blame. We want to blame someone or something. Or we might feel desperate, or we feel shame, or like a failure, perhaps. But if we remember the first noble truth, here's some understanding here, the first noble truth that we all experience suffering and no one wants that. No one wants to suffer. Now, according to the Dalai Lama, he says that given that, the only response that makes sense is compassion. We're all carrying our own burdens. In fact, the Dalai Lama says this, which I think is very beautiful, says, compassion does not make the atrocities of the world go away, but it keeps them from taking up residence in our heart. Then, appreciative joy, mudita. There's a Chinese proverb that says, keep a green tree alive in your heart and a songbird may come to sing there. So there are many references in the sutras, the Dhammapada, to happiness. In fact, one of the epithets for the Buddha was the happy one. And it has been said also that one of the ways to know if your practice is working is if you are becoming happier or more lighthearted. In the Dhammapada it says, let us live happy without hatred even among those who hate. And of course we know that joy is one of the 7 factors of enlightenment. And we could give many, many more examples of this, many examples. A very important element on our path and in our lives. So appreciative joy, in the context of the Brahma Viharas, is metta when it connects with this joy or the success or the happiness of another being. It is really our capacity to connect with what's beautiful. It has been said that it's the song of the liberated heart, the opposite of a contracted and closed heart, right? So joy and appreciative joy is very restorative and refreshing. It's like a restorative spaciousness. And it's necessary to cultivate this so that we're not overwhelmed by the suffering of the world, by the suffering of life, by our own suffering and pain. It allows us to find rest. So we need rest too. Remember, we can remember with it the capacity that we have to be at peace and to cherish that. There are many, many, many aspects of life that are very beautiful, and beauty can be experienced even in the midst of some very, very difficult things. So joy, and appreciative joy, directs our attention to what is beautiful. Upekkha, or equanimity. Now, there are 2 translations that capture the essence of what equanimity means in the context of practice. One refers to equanimity as the capacity to look over or look from above. In other words, the spaciousness of a wider perspective. And we can see things without getting caught or hooked by whatever it is that we're experiencing, whether it's something pleasant or unpleasant, because we can get hooked by either one, right? So an example of that could be this ability to see a bigger perspective. Let's say that the child is, playing with a toy and loses the toy, or the toy breaks or something. And, for the child, who loves the toy, they begin to cry and it's the end of the world and, oh, where's the toy? But you, with your life experience and your wider perspective and your knowledge, you know that this is not the end of the world. You can fix the toy, you can buy a new toy, whatever it may be. So So there's this sense of having a much wider perspective on things, so that any tragedy, be it large or small, is in fact not the end of the world, or not something that's going to throw us completely off balance. The other translation for equanimity, or the word upekkha in Pali, is to stand in the middle of. That is, to stand right in the middle of what's happening without losing our inner balance, without losing our composure. An internal stability, confidence, calm, sense of wholeness, not being pulled off this way or pulled off that way into either extremes of something that may be challenging or unpleasant, or to get pulled off and thrown off balance by something that we could easily crave or want. So it's a stability that can face things without falling into extremes, without shutting down, without falling apart, without losing our composure. And this is to be a very valuable thing to have, right? Living in this world. Also, often in the context of equanimity, the 8 worldly winds are something that's brought up. The 8 worldly winds: praise and blame, gain and loss, pleasure and pain, fame and disrepute. These are part of our lives, no matter what. We cannot escape these. We will always experience all of these things, often completely beyond our control in life. So again, equanimity, this non-reactive stance, will keep us in composed, or with an inner equilibrium as we have to face these things. Equanimity reminds us that every being, all beings have their journey, right? And we cannot always know what someone else's journey is. Sometimes we're not even sure where our own is going. But life is beauty, it's happiness, it's awe, it's connection, separation, death, depression, anxiety, hope, fear. All of these things are a part of our lives as human beings. And although we cannot control them, we can accept them in a different way, with a warm receptivity that simply reminds us this is the way things are, and it doesn't have to throw us off balance. Now, each of the Brahma-viharas has what is called a proximate cause. So this is useful to know as we cultivate it. So proximate cause? What prepares the heart to cultivate each one? So metta, what is a proximate cause for metta, is seeing the good or the good qualities in another, and understanding that all beings want happiness and no one wants to suffer. Proximate cause for compassion is seeing the suffering of another being. The proximate cause for appreciative joy is seeing the success or the happiness of another. And the proximate cause for equanimity is remembering the law of cause and effect, that is to say, the law of karma. Remembering that we are all the owners of our own actions. We are all responsible for our own actions. We can walk together on the path, but no one can walk for us. This is really, really important. And cause and effect, the law of cause and effect, is also a part of right view, right? So we keep these things in mind. So these are the proximate causes to cultivate these qualities. Now, something else that helps us to understand these sublime qualities is seeing the near and far enemies of each one. The near enemy of metta is attachment or craving or compulsive desire. And it's not too hard to see how those things could be confused with loving kindness, no? With attachment, we want to draw the object to ourselves, and that almost always involves some selfing, right? The self is very involved in that. The self wants that for some reason. So the self is the main reference point. But metta does not have self as a primary reference point because, as we said before, it is unconditional and is without expectations and wishes only happiness and well-being for the other. So there's that. The enemy, the far enemy of metta, as you might imagine, if metta is goodwill and loving kindness, the far enemy of that, kind of the opposite, is ill will or aversion. So it's the opposite of wishing for another's well-being. Now, the near enemy of compassion is a kind of a collapsing or despairing in the face of suffering. Perhaps we could even say a powerlessness or a sense of impotence. I can't do anything about it. It just feels overwhelming, right? Or sometimes it could be similar to pity, which kind of has separation between us and the object. Like, oh, poor you, that's happening to you, maybe unspoken, but it's not happening to me, that kind of thing. But in any case, it's this very importantly, this collapsing or despairing in the face of suffering. And the far enemy of compassion would be, logically, cruelty. The near enemy of appreciative joy is a kind of euphoria, a kind of exaggerated exhilaration that has a very dispersed mental energy. That's really, in terms of how we experience it, at least how I've experienced it, that dispersed mental energy is part of it. It feels quite uncomfortable. Like, when it could be something like when a football team wins a championship or something, and they're so exhilarated that they go out and get wildly drunk and, I don't know, turn over cars or pull down signs or something like that. That kind of over the top sort of extreme. But joy, and appreciative joy rather, is a quiet, expansive, spacious joy. Inner smile. A far enemy of appreciative joy, as you might guess, is envy. You're not only not happy for another's success or happiness, but you are resentful or unhappy about it, their good fortune. With respect to equanimity, the near enemy of equanimity is, I don't know if you might guess this or not, but it's indifference. And you could see how that might be, an attitude like, I don't care either way. I don't care either way. Or so many times you hear people say, it is what it is. Well, I hear that a lot. And the difference is that in indifference, there is no warmth or caring. Equanimity cares. Equanimity has warmth. At the same time, it knows that it can't control everything and that all beings have their path or their journey. But there's warmth in it. So that can sometimes trip people up. Now, the far enemy of equanimity is reactivity, is falling into some sort of extreme, getting caught in what's happening, as opposed to standing in the middle or having this wide perspective over what's going on. Now, what I've always found really beautiful and interesting is to look at how these qualities support and protect one another. So, metta, which, as we said, is like the sun that shines equally on all things, gives the other three impartiality. And of course, it's the very definition of warmth and goodwill. Equanimity can give balance to metta, preventing it from falling into a sort of attachment or falling into extremes. It can do that. Compassion protects metta from sentimentality, excessively indulging in sentiment kind of thing. And it protects joy. Compassion can protect joy from forgetting about suffering. We don't want to go off on that end, at that extreme, or from some sort of ignorant optimism or naivete. And compassion and metta also can protect equanimity from coldness and indifference. Appreciative joy gives equanimity a warm, light quality, a certain serenity. It's also a remedy for hopelessness and overwhelm with respect to suffering. Compassion also protects joy from naivete, but joy protects compassion by reminding it that joy also exists. We can't just exist in one thing or the other, right? Because life is made of both of these things, of all of these things. Equanimity gives courage and stability and patience to compassion so that it doesn't collapse in the face of suffering, so that we can stand in the middle of all things without losing our composure, without falling into the extremes. Equanimity also protects joy from the dispersed, contracted states of and scattered states of euphoria that we mentioned earlier. So these are just some of the ways that we see that these are all really, really tied together, right? That they are expressions of the same warmth and kindness and caring manifesting in different situations and all totally balanced and totally connected. No? It's said that if we are going to move through the world, these are the qualities with which to do so. And I would just end with what I think is a lovely quote from a Tibetan text from the 14th century, which says, "In the field of metta, the field of warm friendship, blooms the beautiful flower of compassion, watered by the tears of quiet joy, beneath the cool shade of the tree of equanimity." So, let's just take a moment to be quiet, and then we'll move on. So, we do have some time, and we can share, and I can offer some questions to sort of stimulate your thoughts, or we can do more metta practice. I don't know which you would prefer. Well, okay, then given that, let's just dedicate the merit and leave it there for now. May all beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. May they never be separated from the joy independent of external conditions. And may they come to rest in great equanimity, free from attachment, aversion, and indifference. Thank you very much for your presence and your kind attention and your practice.